Welcome back, everybody. So following on from our last video, this is a video in a series of videos about the settlement of Australia and particularly the migration of people from Europe. So today we're going to have a look at the Industrial Revolution and its effects on emigration, so voluntary emigration to Australia. In the previous video, we talked about how the Industrial Revolution caused people to be unemployed and poor. So there was a crime wave that found convicts being sent here to Australia. So today we're going to look at voluntary migration to Australia and how the Industrial Revolution influenced that process. As mentioned in the previous video, life in Britain was really, really tough during the Industrial Revolution. So the machines that were replaced manual labour meant that many people became unemployed and therefore did not have the money or goods that they needed to survive at that time period. So people often turned to crime or went without a lot of things that they needed. The cities became overcrowded because many people moved from your urban and agricultural areas to the big cities like London, and London also became very polluted and unhealthy during this time. So because they were using coal power, but it was a relatively new technology, they didn't know how to deal with the pollution caused by coal powder, and basically London was covered in a fine black dust in the early time during the Industrial Revolution. Because there were so many people living in such a small place, of course they were unhealthy, there was not great waste management, and people became very sick as well. If you were lucky enough to have a job, you still had to accept low wages because there was so much competition for jobs. Factory owners could force people to accept low wages, long hours and unsafe working conditions because people were so desperate to keep their jobs that they would accept conditions which were not great working conditions just so that they could work for a small wage to provide for their family. So because of the unfavourable lifestyle that people were experiencing in England during the Industrial Revolution, many people voluntarily moved to places such as Australia and the United States in hope of a better life. So some people were forced there like convicts, but some people did not turn to crime and actually voluntarily moved to faraway countries like Australia and the United States in hope that they could have a better life and greater opportunities there. There was also the Great Potato Famine during the 1840s, and that caused even more people to move away from the United Kingdom to Australia and the United States. And between 1840 and 1901, 15 million people left Britain, and 1.75 million of those arrived in Australia. Now, the percentage of people that moved to Australia from the 15 million people that left Britain is on the small side because most people during the 1800s chose to go to North America. North America had been settled for much longer and the fare was cheaper because it was a shorter boat ride and more jobs were available there. However, because America wasn't a British colony anymore, Britain couldn't take advantage of that, and so they wanted to encourage people to move to their colony in Australia. So colonies were always in need of free settlers to open the land and develop agriculture. So the British government developed schemes that would allow people to move more easily to the Australian colony. So because of the nature of the people who settled Australia, because they were convicts, there had always been a shortage of agricultural and other skilled workers in Australia. Because the people who were convicts were mainly unskilled workers, they needed more skilled and agricultural workers to help establish the colony. They also had the problem because men tended to be convicts more than women. There was a higher proportion of men among the convicts. There was many more men than women in the colony, and of course that caused problems for the colony. So the government of New South Wales set up an immigration scheme. It was called the Assisted Passage Scheme, and they offered free passage to Australia for skilled workers. So skilled workers in Britain who could not find work or had not found adequate work could move themselves and their families to Australia for free in order to exchange their skills to help build the Australian colony. There were other reasons aside from the Industrial Revolution that caused people to move to Australia. The gold rushes of the 1850s brought even more people to Australia, and more than 600,000 people came in the 10 years between 1851 and 1861. So particularly when gold was discovered outside of Ballarat, many people, particularly from Britain, America and China, migrated to Australia to find their fortune in the gold fields. However, back to the Industrial Revolution. The Industrial Revolution brought many improvements to our world, and one of those was communications were improvements. So people were not as isolated as they previously were. So moving to Australia was not as big a step because there was improved communications, like the use of steamships, so that that mail was delivered more quickly and things like that. And then in 1872, the overland telegraph connected Australia to the rest of the world, and messages could be sent and received within 24 hours. So these kind of developments that are part of the Industrial Revolution definitely impacted emigration, because people felt more connected to their home country, and it wasn't such a great step to move all the way to Australia.